So when you go back to the chimp incident, have you made peace with that? Are you grateful for that to a certain extent? Like, how do you wind that all the way back? Because it's created the man you are. It's taken you on the journey that it's taken you on.
Yeah, one thing for me about that situation was the fact that I realized it's interesting because when it comes to trauma, I actually, every time until I went to do ayahuasca, I looked back on that and there was no noise. When I relived it in my head, there was no noise. It was just me fighting a chimp. And I realized that no noise was no emotion. And that, when I went to do ayahuasca, I actually went back to the chimp. I went back to the boy. I actually went, this sounds crazy for those that don't know, it went to you, Brian, but I went back, actually went into the chimp.
Wow.
So I looked at me, the young boy, over my baby. And then that did something amazing for me because it made me have a sense of compassion for the chimp. It didn't come looking for me. I found myself in its enclosure, and it did what any mother would do. It would risk anything to protect its young. And there was two things I learned from that situation. First of all, it took me away from being the victim. And give the majority of people a chance, they'll snap your arm off when it comes to being a victim, won't they? They love it. So really for me, it took me away. It made me something bigger. It made me a bigger part of that whole dynamic. It took me away from being the victim. And it made me a lot more compassionate, not only for the chimp, but it made me more compassionate about the people that are close to me in my life. My wife and the pressure I apply on her and around her son, my stepson. You know, so it made me realize, and I thought after doing ayahuasca, I'm cured. You know, you think, well, I've done that, I'm cured. And it wasn't until 2 years later I thought, well, I'm not really good with compassion. And another thing I heard when I was on one of my journeys is stop fighting. Stop fighting. And that's not in wars and stuff like that. I realized since that chimp, I've been fighting everything, every system. When I was in the military, I was a pain, an absolute pain to my hierarchy. I did my job, I could shoot straight, I could swim fast, but stop fighting. I was fighting every system. I'm all for putting up a fight, but when it's at the detriment to your evolution, positive evolution, you need to do something about it. So I then realized afterwards, it never healed me, it told me exactly where to look. So now, very often, I'm telling myself, don't fight. And a lot of the time I take a breath and be a lot more compassionate because I know I struggle with that.
So let's zoom way out. Why ayahuasca? You had already, I'm guessing you were sober before you went there. So you had, figured yourself out to a certain extent. Why ayahuasca? Why do this? Why go there? When did you go?
I feel the universe chose that for me.
Okay.
I came back from Australia, had a girlfriend. Well, I moved to Australia with a girlfriend who was a psychologist, saved me a fortune. But she, we were still on talking terms. And when I came back to the UK, she discovered ayahuasca. And she said to me, you should try ayahuasca. I think you'd really find some benefit from that. And it's amazing how the universe works. And all of a sudden, because my brain was switched on to that, I started to look at a few things on Instagram. Next thing I'd like to post. And then I got a message from this organization in America called the Heroic Hearts Project, mainly veterans, that they were using this plant medicine to really heal these veterans. And the guy, Jesse, said, hey mate, we've got a retreat coming up at Soltara. That's where you went, didn't you?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. I didn't know you went there.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Got a retreat coming up in Soltara. Would you be available for it? And I went, let me check my diary. Yep, available, of course. And he said, you wouldn't be available next week as well, would you? Because I'm in London. Looked at my diary, I was going to London. And that's where it all rolled from there.
When was that?
That was 2019, back end. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So you met him and then you went?
I met him, went 14 other veterans from all over the world with some horrendous stories, and it was so funny. It's funny when I look back because I stopped drinking. My life was great, and I was like, what's my intention? And I was making it up. I went to see the shaman. He said, what's your intention? Why are you here? And I just went, I just don't want to push the self-destruct button again in my life if something bad happens. And he went, okay. And then I'm just getting up off my
that wasn't true.
Off the floor. No, it was this. I was just getting up and I went, oh, and by the way, there was this thing with a chimp when I was 10, but that's all gone. And the shaman just sat there. He went, he just smiled because he knew. He knew. And what they say is, as you know, is it goes to where it's needed, not where you want it.
Yeah.
And that night I went back and met me.
Peter Thiel took $500,000 and turned it into $1 billion using the exact same techniques we're using inside the investment club. He met a CEO, his name was Zuckerberg. He pitched him the deal and he said, okay, I'll give you $500,000. Mark went public and sold the shares to people like you. Well, what happened to Peter? Well, he exited and got a 2,300x return. The wealthy invest in early stage companies, folks. The public markets are for suckers. It's a rigged game. By the way, this happens in crypto as well. It's called pre-sale tokens. This is Solana. Does anybody know this chain? They sold pre-sale tokens for 4 cents. And you can see the date on there, April 5th, 2018. Look at Solana today, folks. That thing's up over 1,000x. The media and Wall Street and all these hype people get you to buy the top. Meanwhile, they put their clients in at the bottom and they use you for liquidity to make their clients rich. You can play this same game. You just have to have the financial education and the deal flow. That's it.
As a 10-year-old boy, and that emotion that I'd switched off, didn't hear and locked away, I heard it all. Every moment of that attack. I've got to say it wasn't comfortable, but it was something I needed to do.
The first ceremony went right there.
Well, I went to the Chimp first.
Okay.
And that's when I learned compassion and everything else.
You went straight to the Chimp's perspective on your first ceremony.
Chimp's perspective.
Wow.
And then after that one, I thought, oh, great, I've dealt with that. What's next? And then the second exposure to it, I was going down this sort of corridor, this round. You're in the Maloca anyway, aren't you?
Is it Playa Blanca, the main place there in Costa Rica?
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Amazing, isn't it?
Beautiful.
And it was almost like these doors were slightly open, and I could have chose each of these doors for different aspects of my life. But then I was pulled to this one where the door opened, and as the darkness cleared at the bottom, I could see myself again at the circus. And I'm actually going down this corridor with my nails scraping down a chalk wall, going, I don't want to go back, because I knew what was happening. I thought I'd got away with it, and I was going back to relive the attack. And I went back to, I actually went into the boy again, and then the attack played out. And I can remember now, for the first time ever in my life, I remember that. And it was like, I felt every emotion. I was screaming for my mum, screaming. You know, a little boy being attacked, being ripped apart. I was so terrified, screaming and everything. And then all of a sudden, it stopped, froze. And I heard this voice go, what would have happened if you hadn't have fought back that day? And then all of a sudden, I lay on the floor, closed my eyes. And as I opened my eyes, my wife was there. Her face was right here, and her blue eyes, beautiful blue eyes. And I looked at her and I said, don't worry, come with me. And then we died, we drifted off. We were no longer a physical body. We were, went into the spiritual world, into the spirit world, whatever you want to call it. And it was incredible. We were in this place and it felt just amazing. The sounds and everything, the colors and everything, it was just, I didn't want to come back. And I was in there and I was like, I'm never going back, never going back. And then I heard a voice say, they need you. And I came back into my body, and it was quite interesting because I thought I'd been there for like hours. You know, they keep you quite controlled in there, don't they?
Yeah.
And I woke up and I was like, bang, I shot up onto my feet and I went to see one of the guys helping out. I went, I've seen it. I know what it's all about. And it was like this discovery. And I was like, I'm going, and I shot off and went to my accommodation. It was only 3 hours in of about an 8-hour, I shouldn't have done that. And then I went back to my room, and then I had water, which then ignited the ayahuasca again in my room. And then all this stuff started coming out. It's incredible. And one thing I did write down, which I love this, and it really typified my journey, was pain screams the loudest when it's dying. And this is what we do. All of humanity is the same. And it's like a relationship, isn't it? You know it should end, but once it starts screaming, all you've got to do is turn around, give it a hug, and the screaming stops. And you end up throwing yourself into that. But what you've got to do in those moments is understand it's the birth of something new. And this is what we should embrace. You know, when I actually was in Australia and I knew things were changing, my world started to fall apart. And initially I was in shock, going, oh my God, this is bad, I'm going to lose my job, this, that and the other. Everything was crumbling because I had this desire to do something different. And then I had to take a breath and understand it was falling apart for a reason. Allow it to fall apart and embrace the birth of something new. So there's some amazing, amazing things in that experience. And,
so you were kind of dying along with your wife, and then you came back because they need you to be back.
Yeah.
And that's why you lived that day as well.
Yeah.
And yet, even though you process this in the ceremony, you also realize later that it's not all done and dusted and wrapped up in a nice little box.
No.
You realize that Well, how was the integration process after those next few months, after you had those visions?
It's interesting. You come away from that and you are a changed person. In those short term, initially you're a very changed person, but then society dilutes everything you've sort of learned and grown, how you've grown and you've evolved. It kind of, society then dilutes that. But really, it's just understanding. It was only, like I say, 2 years after that when I actually realised I wasn't healed.
Right.
It told me exactly where to look.
Did you go back for more ceremonies?
I would,
okay.
but I don't feel I need to.
Yeah.
I've had the opportunity to.
But you had a reminder 2 years later that you have to keep working on these issues.
Keep working, yeah. But I think there's, at the end of the day, you've got to think that there's receptors in your body for the ayahuasca, so that means you should be able to get there without the medicine.
Hey, I know investing in crypto is scary. It takes a real leap of faith because there are so many scams, rug pulls, and bad actors out there. It's a dangerous business, which is why 95% of people lose all their money. Well, that's why I created the London Real Investment Club, so you can access the hottest deals on the planet and use the crypto bull market to create the generational wealth that you deserve. Join my team of over 100 people from around the world that are making millions of dollars behind the scenes investing in blockchain, AI, Web3 games, DeFi, Bitcoin, and more. Don't miss out. Click the link below to book a call with one of my team now. But hurry, this bull market will end soon.
I know investing in crypto can be scary. That's why you gotta join the investment club. Pull the trigger. Let's do this.